I don't know if you guys can hear that. There's like the most fucking metal sounding like roof service device, I guess. I don't know how I would even begin to sort that and to convey and categorize the information I'm receiving coming from my window. So that's a nice place to start. Let me see if I can throw my music on here. Okay, I'm gonna go right to my homepage on YouTube and see what cool music I can find on my recommended. Okay, hang on. It's being really slow. Nope. I just clicked the pause and it started. Okay. Okay. It's kind of cool. Let's get started. So, I've been reading a book. Here it is. I got it from local neighborhood library, which is kind of an interesting concept. And it's about, well, it's called Talking About Politics and Formal Groups and Social Identity in American Life. And it's essentially about how the way we talk about politics and interact with politics shapes our understanding and shapes this politics thing itself. And it goes on to use social identity to sort of describe the knowledge production process, blah blah, a bunch of sociological language. And it's been very interesting, and I've been finding it came into my life at a very apt and appropriate time, which is nice. So I'd like to go on to talk about that a little bit and maybe see if I can pull some selections of the book to lead an investigation into just knowledge itself and how we use it practically in reality, and maybe just critique and examine our usage thereof so that we could use it better or see it in a way which might give us certain accessibility or insight which we may have not had in the first place. Because knowledge, if you're any familiar with philosophy over the years, knowledge has been a hell of a question, and it's quite a slippery endeavor and quest. So the first thing I want to start us with here is we have this idea that knowledge is power, and knowledge is truth, right? And if knowledge is power and knowledge is therefore truth, is power that isn't true truly powerful? And is truth that isn't powerful truly truthful? So let's start with a selection here, because that was a bombshell, I think, and I can think a lot about that, and I hope to get some dimensionality out of that. So it starts off and it talks about how the general understanding is that political understanding and interpretation comes through sort of elite trickle down of information. So we get our information from sort of political elite sources, and that forms our understanding, which we go on to inseminate the world with and spread all our lovely disinformation. So the first section here is understanding is about categorization. Models of understanding generally agree that interpretation is fundamentally about categorization. Simply put, to make sense of the world, people carve it up into manageable parts. So let's start with this object here. So I have this before me. What this is, it's some kind of shaking instrument which I'll use in my production. On the tag, Palo de Louisviva 20C Artesiana Mexicana. There we are. My Wi-Fi just I'm not going to jump into that because I'm going to distract myself. But I have this object before me, and I can see I'm carving up bits out of it. I'm taking pieces of it. For example, right now it's made of wood. It's a cylindrical shape. It's made in Mexico. I use it for these properties, right? I'm describing it, and I'm filtering it through certain categories and certain pre-existing information, such as my knowledge of Mexico, my prerequisite context of music production, my concept and idea of wood, the ideas of production and manufacturing and how things get here, and all this other prerequisite information which is going into sort of ornament and foundationalize. God, I'm the things I do to language. Ugh, this event, if you could even call it that, this event, you know, and there's just endless amount of detail I can pull out of that event and that experience. And it goes on to say, when people try to make sense of an event, they type it as an instance of a given category, thereby calling up information that has been stored in the schema relevant to that category. The schema is kind of explained through an allegory of a filing cabinet. I like the idea of a wardrobe or a closet, where we have these big sort of mental walk-in closets where you go and you have this and you have this and that and etc. And you can try on the clothes, and you know, we have all these pieces of information, all of these different events and all of their sort of logical relationships. And when there's a certain event triggered in the world, such as we have this interpretive framework which comes around and categorizes that, but the actual categories I apply to this, the fact of wood, of music production, of manufacturing, of all of this and that is predetermined by other knowledge, by other events. So what the book kind of goes on to describe is the social process there as such, how in that elite top-down model, certain framing is used to understand those prerequisite and predisposed schemas to trigger certain responses into almost organized information to create certain knowledge and outcomes in society and persuasion, right? And it's really had me just questioning. Well, there's another section I could add which I think is interesting. I'm going a bit fast here because I've already done a few takes of this and I haven't been very satisfied, and I'm uploading another one of those takes now, but as I'm uploading it, my son of a bitch who lives in my mind is like, yeah, you can do it better. So here I am, like half-baked and neurotic. I'm kind of hitting like a little, it's like I'm, you know, driving forth in a car and you hit these little bumps of mania and it gives you like a boost to get the fucking thing down. But no, it says a key influence on interpretation occurs when schemas that have been called up provide information that fills in the blanks for information not provided by the message or survey question. So what that means is, look at this. I have this object before me and I take it in, and you guys can see the label on here which describes this and that about Mexica and blah, 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 blah. I don't have access to that in my direct experience. And knowledge starts, our conventional notions of science, we start with experience, and that's where everything starts from. All you have is experience. So I know that that's there because, first of all, I can look on the screen and see my preview and see in the camera that there's that there, and I've seen this before, and I know that this is an object that exists in spatiotemporality, and it has these functions, and I can have that construction of knowledge I can apply to this, and I can get that accessibility and that practicality out of reality as such in that way. And it has really been setting me for a loop how our identification of reality works, and the difference between where I start with this experientially and what it is that I make of it, and just the paying attention to that process of how this thing is made to be something, and how we can even access reality and what our experience is made to be. Because when this is whatever it is, it fundamentally changes your experience of reality. Let me give you an example. If someone broke into my house in the middle of the night and stuck this up my butt. I'm sorry, this was just the first thing that came to mind. That's a little concerning, but someone came and did that. And now with that in mind, with that context in mind, I'm looking at this. That association, that knowledge construction, that context will be very different than what I have when I'm looking at this now. So the mind is what we're doing with objects are determining a lot more than we think. This isn't just some sort of metaphysical mind game. What we're doing is we're describing that process so that we can understand the mechanics of what's happening. And that's why I'm enjoying this book so much, because it's coming at an apt time in my life, because I'm really starting to question identity. I'm really starting to question just this whole notion of how we build these big structures up of reality, and we walk around with these big sort of clunking, I like to call them metaphysical Jenga towers, because they're made of blocks. You know, we have all the different items in the filing cabinet, or the articles of clothing as such, and you know what happens in Jenga is you take the blocks out of it, right? You like, look at this. So we call up an event and we take one block of, oh, this is made of wood, or this is this and that. Those are all the different blocks. But as those blocks are investigated, what seems to happen is those blocks, to explain those blocks and to relate them, it makes new closets. It makes new sort of corridors. And I think with the mind, as we start to understand things, we run into this problem of infinite regress, where we explain things in terms of other things, and in terms of other things, and in terms of other things. And where it actually all starts, I abstract further and further away from this direct experience that I have, and I worry that in knowledge we can get so far into our own constructions of things that we can miss what's right before our eyes sometimes, for better or for worse, because sometimes we need to look, because what's before our eyes is still its own construction. But the closer I can get to this, and I've been finding the closer I can get to reality, the closer I can approach these sort of virtues, cardinal virtues of the individual, you know, which is itself, like everything, its own context, its own sort of knowledge construction. But as I see them, you know, to really touch freedom, and if, as described in this book, you know, we're all reducible to these perspectives and to these social identities and all this and that, and it kind of goes on to describe how the sort of clanging and banging of perspectives and identity groups and all these different things, how that sort of happens and that forms knowledge and sort of progresses the political process, and how that can be understood politically and all this and that. Well, a bunch of weird shit. It almost kind of like reminds me of some of our other more metaphysical notions of reality. As reality is just the sort of banging and clanging of more fundamental parts like atoms and stuff like that, which is curious and which is interesting. But I think this understanding of understanding kind of touches us against the, I want to say, the emptiness of our own perspective and our own understandings, and it's had me kind of questioning and just paying more attention to how certain knowledge constructions work, and how so much of what I know about this, I don't know that this was made in Mexico. I don't know that this is made of wood. For all I know, this could be something which appears very much like wood and activates all of those outstanding concepts of wood, but may not actually be the case. But you see, for me to say it's made out of wood, there still has to be a similarity. There still has to be something to it. So I don't believe that knowledge isn't possible. There's not something authentic happening as I experience this, and there's not something to our experience which is foundational. But I've been worrying about the whole process of recognition and of what happens when we contain reality, and how when I step into this object, when I breathe the life of my attention and my direct sort of naked intimacy with this before me, I see the light reflect off it. I see the fine details. I see the just natural imprint of that. Like you see here in the middle pieces, there's these specks in between, right? And seeing the little lines that make up the wood inside of it, like, I was not aware of that when I was first looking at this. When I was classifying this into all these different things, I didn't see that. So what we're actually seeing, what reality actually is so determined by the attention and the detail and just the outstanding organization, which kind of, I want to say, pulls the strings of our attention itself. And I find in all of the structures and all of the sort of big clunky Jenga towers, you know, that's good and all. We need one of those because it naturally happens, it naturally occurs, but to be able to let go more. And I've been finding solace in some of my more traditional Eastern notions of self, where self is less of this sort of identifiable individual kind of set of, you know, this is me and this is my thoughts and this is my take and my this is what it means to me and my perspective and my all this and that. Where, for example, I'll be in discussions and it doesn't always need to be what I think of things, you know. sure, I can compare certain thoughts to other thoughts in my mind. I think it's credited to Aristotle, this notion, the hallmark of a high quality mind is being able to take on thoughts or ideas without accepting or rejecting them, but to essentially just investigate. And I think we have these ideas of ourselves as these sort of on-off kind of binary systems, but the more you investigate that, it's just more binary systems made out of more binary systems, and it makes me wonder if the binary system of, existence or non-existence or whatever you want to chop it up to is ever really going to be the full picture of reality, and what the point of that whole process really comes down to. And I find in more and more of that naturally sort of God-given desire, and just what I'm left with in my naked sort of being as I just examine this, and just the natural wonder and curiosity which arises, the more I pursue that more in my experience, the more frustrated I become with the limitations of it, and the more I learn to put it down. And I think in the process of being able to put it down and to take that step back and to get out of the whole individualizing and perspectivizing everything, what I mean by that is containing reality and constructing it into a perfect sort of form, the further I get away from actually doing that. And it's similar to where I left off in our last time together, if you caught that. I'm not sure how entirely possible that is, and if that's not possible, well, what implications does that have on the process itself? Because that's still an answer. That's still something to say. And what I've been the most skeptical of is the skepticism itself, you see? So it's not about not having a perspective, it's not about not having something to say, but it's about everything that there is to say, and how what there is to say is just one thing to say, and it's almost like stepping out so we can truly step in, if that makes sense. And this all seems very abstract and metaphysical, and it is, I think, but I found it's been slightly turbulent. I've not been finding this shift, and I've had to come here very much kicking and screaming, and it's still very much a work in progress and will be. But it just had me reconsidering what authenticity, what truth is, what I really am, what it really means to be myself. You hear be you. I was on an app on Bumble looking for friends, and it says you can be you on Bumble. Pick your pronouns or your interests and all this and that. It's like, great, sure, but is that really all there is? And I find the more I need things to stay in one place, the less they seem to do that, and the more dissatisfied I am with that process. It's really where I'm left with. And I think all of this has very profound social implications, and it's really just had me rethinking who I am, who I ought to be in the world, what to do, the most primary question of what to do, what do we do. And it's really not to throw hands up or to abandon the project altogether. It's really a deepening, I think. It's really a deepening. And I love the way this maps onto politics, and it's such a fruitful sort of consideration, which I really don't have the balls or the interest to really expand on or investigate at the moment. Maybe another time, if that's what happens. But if knowledge is power and knowledge is truth, then is power which isn't true truly powerful? And I think that's where our power and our freedom and where the truth really lies. Anyways, that's all. Thank you. Is there anything I want to conclude with here? I feel pretty satisfied. I feel like I could kind of move my my intellectual bowels. So thanks for being the recipient thereof. Sorry for your loss. I've just disseminated my constructed knowledge onto you, It's interesting. Okay, goodbye.